Arguably one of the most important things for you to farm, especially if you're still playing normal mode of the First Descendant, is a really good weapon that you can use to deal a shitload of damage in the Void Intercept missions. That's because these missions, and basically of course what I'm referring to is this over here, these Void Intercept battles, these are essentially DPS checks for you. Well, yeah, it's also mechanic checks, like you have to understand, like not standing in the fucking fire and, you know, like not getting shot by standing right in front of the enemy. And obviously you also need to start learning things like defense, HP and resistance stacking is good. But it usually also comes down to a DPS check for your character, because the idea being that these are gating you in a way from progressing on further in the story until you have geared up your weapons and your Descendant enough that you deal enough damage. That brings us to this thing right here, and this is of course the Tamer, which is a machine gun that you can get in the game. It's a rare drop that you can farm. I'll show you exactly where to farm it, but the point is that this weapon is so damn good that you're not going to really need anything else to pretty much kill these Void Intercept bosses. By default, its stats are just really good, and then once you start actually spending some time on it and actually putting in some mods there and pretty much beefing it up. Now mine of course has already, you know, been severely beefed up, but even by its default state and with a couple of these mods inserted and leveled up, you are going to be looking at a weapon that is exceptionally good at dealing a lot of damage, as you saw in that video at the beginning. Now, in terms of, first of all, let's quickly talk about like where you can farm it, and then I will explain to you the different versions of it that you can build and pretty much the stats that you're looking for on it, like for it, on it, that you know you want to be spending some mats on to reroll, potentially to get yourself a nice, good, you know, Tamer. So first and foremost, the two spaces off the top of my head that I can think of where you can farm this is Agna Desert. If you go over here, and I believe it's this abandoned reconstruction site, so we can just hold in Alt and you can see that at the bottom, Tamer, 50% chance of getting it. Now sometimes you get blue Tamers that drop. Obviously you don't want that shit, so you'll throw that away, but basically this weapon will drop in this mission from the enemy sometimes, or you can basically get it as a reward at the end of the mission when you complete it. There's a second place that you can also farm this if for some reason you're not fortunate enough to get one in that area, or you want to try something else to sort of like, you know, just space it out a little bit, try something new. You can also go to the White Knight Gulch, and this is of course going to be more difficult. This is a higher end area, but the Order's occupied facility, same thing. Oops, sorry, same thing at the bottom there. You can see 50% chance of getting a Tamer. Same thing. In my opinion, this mission is in a way faster for me. Again, if you are a little bit further on in the game and you can actually survive in White Knight Gulch, because it can get a little bit spicy, this is, in my opinion, the preferred place to go farm it, and actually the one that I'm using right now came from this mission. But then, as mentioned, the next thing that is also good about this weapon is the fact that it is a rare, which means the overall maintenance of this weapon is going to be a lot cheaper, because it doesn't use the same materials to basically upgrade other guns, or, you know, onto it to increase its level or to re-roll its stats. It uses a different set of materials because it's rare, and these materials are cheaper to research and also just cheaper to essentially have a lot of. So you're gonna have a much easier time essentially just rolling this weapon in many different ways to try and get the best version of it. Now, when it comes to, again, like I said, the best version of it, pretty much what you're looking for, since this is our boss killing weapon, is you're looking for firearm attack, you're looking for bonus firearm attack versus Colossus. Of course, you want these stats to roll as high as possible, so, you know, you want them to get to blue, purple, possibly gold. Weak point damage, if you want to run the weak point version of this, which I'll also talk about just now. Or you want something like firearm critical hit damage if you want to be running the one that's more focused on crits. In my opinion, these are the two ways that you can basically run the weapon. But the bottom line here is this one that I have here actually has like the best of both worlds in a way, and it's dipping into both sides of the damage equation there. I don't have an element on this, so I have to use modifications to put an element on here, and that's okay, because then I pretty much tailor the weapon to whichever boss I'm fighting. So if I'm fighting a boss that's weak against, you know, ice, then I go ahead and put ice damage in, or cold damage in. If I fight something that's weak against electric, you know, you guys get the idea. As for the ways that you can basically set this up with the mods that you want, there's the weak point side of this, because of course these big bosses that you fight have weak points that you can shoot, and that will allow you to deal a lot of additional damage. And by default, usually you want to go rifling reinforcement, you want to go fire rate up. That's in either which one of the two versions of the gun. And then if you are going for the weak point version, you want to start stacking things like weak point damage in. And basically action and reaction is also good just for additional firearm attack. So again, this is present on both sides of the gun. I personally, so at the moment right now, you can see that this is configured to deal chill damage. So this is the one that you would swap out. So if you want to deal fire, then you put fire damage in. If you want to deal electric, you guys get the idea. The reload on this, because it is a machine gun, is super slow. So I use Recycling Genius on here because it gives me a much faster reload. Well, 30% is no joke. And it's extremely noticeable on your reloads if you're not using this. So I kind of like, I've gotten so used to this now that the gun feels like fucking broken if I don't have this on. But of course, this takes up, some mod capacity. So if you don't have enough mod capacity on the gun, then this is one of the ones that can potentially go. And the same is true for this vibration absorption. I use this because it improves my recoil situation, because my recoil situation is being fucked by me using action and reaction. So this is essentially the weak point setup of this. There are some other mods and stuff that you can put into this, of course, to make it even better. But at the stage in the game where you're still playing normal and you don't have access to all of like the best mods yet, this is a pretty rock solid setup for a weak point version of this weapon. Then if you're thinking of running crit, you have a couple of different options. So again, working with your core setup, which is rifling reinforcement, fire rate up, and action reaction, because those three together are going to give you a huge boost in your actual DPS with the weapon, because you're going to shoot faster and your bullets are going to get hit harder. Again, I'm using Recycling Genius on here. You don't have to. But then the thing is, then you can start stacking things like better concentration in, which is more, bigger critical hits. Better insight, which is a higher critical hit rate. And then you can put in some, of the other ones, which again also increase your critical hit rate. And this one even gives you critical hit rate and weak point damage. I believe that there's a way that you can set this weapon up if you can put enough modules into it that you can actually dip into both, that it can be good at weak point and crit, meaning that you're critting on weak points, which is ridiculously good. And that is something that I'm building towards, but I don't have enough of those mods leveled just yet. So look for a follow-up video or something like that where I'll show the thing basically, melting a fucking boss or something like that. But the bottom line, one last thing I want to say is that with machine guns, the base stat, because this is maybe something that a lot of people don't know, but like for example here where this thing says firearm critical hit rate plus 10%, it's misleading in a way because you think that this is going to give you 10% additional crit chance, right? So that's kind of like what it means if you just read it like that. But that's not actually how this shit works. So if we go tab and we go to weapon info on the side here, and let me just take my face away here, you'll see that the firearm critical hit rate of the Tamer is 11.9%. So I believe by default it starts at 10%, and then with this additional crit rate that I've put in there, it increases to 11.9. So pretty much what this means is that when you use any mod that gives critical hit rate, it gives it as that percentage of the original starting amount. So it's not a flat 10% on top or a flat 50% on top, but rather 10% of the 10% that the weapon started on, which means we end up at something like 12% because of some of the other ones which are adding on. But I think you guys get it. But that's it. That's the Tamer. Get the shit as soon as you can. It's so good that I have a hard time believing that this weapon is not gonna get nerfed at some point. I really hope that that's not the case, because obviously people, including myself, have spent a lot of time developing this weapon and putting mods and shit into it. So that's gonna suck if they do that. But it's really, really strong. And if you are struggling with any of these intercept bosses, especially the ones in normal, this gun is going to make a huge difference for you, and it's going to help you most likely get past whichever one you're stacking behind. So go ahead and grab that, and good luck farming it and getting a good roll for it. Keep an eye on the channel for any future videos coming out around First Descendant. I've got a bunch more coming out. I appreciate you watching, especially if you're still here. And as always, it's just super important to me that you have a fantastic morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world. Till next video, fucking cheers.